Hello friends, this is Otz, and today I'm bringing you something really fascinating. Yesterday I was on Twitch when I came across this man, Umedo Games. He's a very experienced killer with thousands of hours in the game, and who also happens to be a Trapper main with 1000 hours on the Trapper alone. So as you can imagine, I was absolutely delighted to watch him play. And as it so happens, he went up against a very interesting group of survivors. The Nia and the David, if I'm not mistaken, were a Survive with Friends group. And both Claudettes were solo players who happened to be streamers who were live at the time. And being able to watch their point of view later was very eye-opening. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to see this game unfold from everyone's perspectives and switch when it makes sense to do so. Let's jump right into it. So we spawn in the Ironworks of Misery. And if you ask me, this is a very decent Trapper map. Before we go on though, we're going to stop and have a look at his build. Up top we've got Enduring, which is a very solid perk that works well with most killers. Enduring cuts the recovery from stuns from pallets in half, which means that you can swing through pallets or walk right through them, and if you get stunned, you almost don't feel it. You lose so little time that you can break the pallet right away or go around, sometimes even resulting in a hit right there and then. Some people will like to run Enduring with Spirit Fury, but beware, I think this is a mistake. Strong survivors know that this is a common trick, and every third pallet they will make sure to drop it early, denying you of 2 perks. So this is not a combination that I like to run. It only works against weaker players, and stronger players can completely counter it. So I'm happy to see that he's only running Enduring. At the bottom we've got Barbecue and Chili. This is a tracking perk that also happens to double your blood points, and honestly I think he just runs it for the double blood points. And if that's the case, that's completely fine, we're not going to overthink it. On the left we've got Hex Ruin, one of the strongest perks in the game, if not the strongest perk in the game. Buys you time, makes survivors waste their own time at the beginning when the Trapper needs it most. And on the right we've got Hex No One Escapes Death, a very strong and controversial perk that makes you one-shot survivors near the end if the conditions are met. According to his reasoning, he runs it to counter people who rush generators too hard and don't pay attention to Hex totems, and I can't blame him for that. On top of this, he's also running 2 add-ons. The brown back, which lets him start with 1 extra trap and carry 1 extra trap, and the yellow setting tools, which lets him place traps down a little bit faster. As a very experienced trapper, Umedo knows exactly the layout of these tiles, and he also remembers where grass spawns, so he's going to put the trap down immediately to free up 1 slot and pick up another trap. This next trap that he will place is a really good textbook trap that will catch people trying to use this LT wall. He places it down and immediately moves on to place another trap. And this trap really surprised me. If it was up to me, I would have placed my trap right here, where the grass is a little bit thicker, and it's somewhat harder to see it. This trap of mine would catch people coming from all over here trying to get into the building. But his trap is also very interesting. Even though it's a little bit more visible, it's catching all of these angles as they go around these boxes. Very strong, and I'm definitely taking some notes here. We'll see if it pays off. And you can tell that he's immediately eyeing the next trap that he's going to go and pick up, and he's most likely going to place it down ASAP on the next loop. And that's exactly what he's about to do until he hears a generator being worked on. Looking at the point of view of one of our streamers, we can see that they're hiding right here. But let's be honest, it's often a waste of time to look for survivors that might not even be there. Back to our streamer, we can see that he's chasing the David, and that he's taking him to the open part of the map where tons of pallets usually spawn. He will do a little trick here to try to trick the David and gain a little bit of distance on him. I'm not sure if it works, but he does gain a little bit of distance, and right at this moment, it is very clear that he's not going to be able to hit him if he swings through the pallet. That being said, the David cannot go for another loop. This will be a mistake from the David if he keeps running. However, this is the start of the match, where survivors and killers are constantly trying to measure each other and see how far each other will go. The David thinks that this killer will respect the pallet and wait, or swing through it and miss. And he makes a gamble. He decides to keep running. But this killer with Enduring, he's definitely not stopping. He goes right through the pallet, and rightly so he gets a hit on the David. The David very wisely doesn't drop the pallet and instead uses that speed boost to keep running. Right as he heads here, he makes an interesting decision. He could go through that window right now, but he remembers that the trapper came from this direction, and he very wisely assumes that that window might be trapped. Now, it is not trapped, but for all he knew, it could have been trapped, so good decision on him. Instead, he uses his little distance that he's got, and he makes it pretty far. He makes it to this structure that can spawn a pallet right around that corner. Now, the killer knows, because he's already been there, that there's no pallet there, but David doesn't know, and he's about to find out. Right at this point, David finds out, and as you can see, he stands still in a very weird way. Why would he do this? It's right at this moment that the killer guesses correctly what just happened. That David, who had a medkit, actually has an insta-heal, and he tried to stop, to use the insta-heal, heal himself one state, and then take another hit so that he can run the killer for longer. However, he did not have enough time. The killer correctly guessed it, so good for him. And right now he's about to be in a really good spot. He's about to hook the David in the place where all of his traps are located, and he also spots another survivor that is close. This Claudette right here. Now, why is that Claudette standing there?
He's seen me.
Okay, that explains it. If he downs her quickly, everybody else will have to come and help. But he can't quite find her. Where is she? Back to our trapper man. You can see that he's in an even stronger situation right now. He's about to get a second hook also close to his perimeter of traps, and if he decided to play his cards right, he could win the game right here. The other two survivors have to make a very tough decision. Do they continue working on generators, and thus working slower than they'd like? Or do they come for the save and risk stepping on a trap and risk losing right there and then? It's a difficult decision. But he makes a very interesting choice. Instead of looking around and trying to use barbecue to find the other survivor, he acknowledges that this is a winning position for him and decides to challenge himself. Instead of putting down more traps around this area or heavily camping it, he literally goes away and allows them to go for the unhooks. Now, this is a very honorable decision, but it's one that you as a killer, if you want to win, should never make. He's about to leave the area where all of his traps are located, leaving his traps and the hook people exposed. If he wants to win, he will have to make very good use of his time and place really good traps in this meantime. And the next trap that he puts down, I think, is a mistake. This trap is very obviously not covering the entire pallet and is supposed to catch someone who is looping around it, but you can see that it's not very well covered by grass. And someone who just casually walks through the pallet is going to spot it. That's what I thought when I watched it live, and as it so happens, that's what occurred later in the game, as we can see in this clip from a few minutes from now. But back to our trapper, we can see that he's fully committing to kicking this generator and walking around the map instead of going back and pressuring survivors now that they've gone for the unhook. Again, if you're trying to win, this is a mistake, and this is why. One of the survivors has stepped on one of his traps, and he is nowhere near to make that count. That survivor would eventually escape right away by herself. And even if she didn't escape by herself, she would have had 3 survivors right nearby to help her. But yet again, our trapper man is fully aware of this. He understands it, he acknowledges it, and he doesn't even seem bothered by it. Instead, he uses his back and puts more traps down that will hopefully be useful. But despite being overly nice, this trapper hasn't wasted his time either. Just like in chess, he has been picking up his pieces and moving them around to activate them. Pretty much every single one of his traps is in a potentially good spot right now. Now, personally, I don't spread my traps over the entire map, as I think that it's very difficult to defend them, but the way he plays is very interesting, and he might just make it work. At any rate, he's back to his original position, and all of the survivors are pretty much done healing. You'll see that he spots 2 of them right here, and he has a choice. Does he go for the Nia or does he go for the David? Now, the David has been hooked once, so it would make sense to chase him to secure a second hook and make sure that he's pressured properly. But we have to remember that David has a medkit, and spoilers, he correctly assumed that that medkit is an insta-heal. After hitting that David and seeing that he's running off to the part of the map where his traps are almost non-existent, he should have let him go right here. If that David plays his cards right and uses the insta-heal, he's going to require 2 more hits to go down. This is a time that this killer simply cannot afford, but instead, he does decide to go for him. And what follows is a chase that goes on for far too long, for over 2 minutes, where this David predictably uses the insta-heal the moment he has a chance, and now requires 2 hits to go down. Eventually, the chase leads to an unsafe pallet. Playing around this pallet is not good for the survivor. As soon as the pallet drops, the killer will have a guaranteed hit if he plays his cards right. However, the David waits and drops it at the last possible second, and then plays around this unsafe pallet really well. Our trapper isn't too decided, and he wastes quite a bit of time making sure that that hit connects. But since this hit doesn't result in the David going down, he still gains a lot of distance, and the chase again goes on for too long. Eventually our trapper catches up to the David, and it's becoming more and more clear that he will drop pallets to gain as much time as possible, so maybe going for a mind game here wasn't the smartest idea. Eventually the trapper does break the pallet, and now the David is in a structure that he has previously trapped. However, this trap right here assumes that the survivor is going to loop around the structure efficiently, and we'll see that that's not exactly what the David does. He drops the pallet immediately and doesn't seem to follow the perfect path around the structure. You can see that the trapper is visibly bothered by this and will try to make him step on it by not breaking the pallet, but it doesn't work. Sometimes when you put a trap down, you have to take into consideration which direction the tile is facing. If the survivor has too many options, it becomes way too hard to predict where exactly he will go. So perhaps this trap could have been put to better use elsewhere. Again, the David seems very happy to make distance and waste time. Now that Ruin is gone, he understands that buying an extra minute for his team can be really powerful. And again, we're in a similar situation to before, and the trapper doubles down on that strategy, but this time it works. The David steps on the trap, and what follows is a bit of a messy situation. Let's have a look.
Uh-oh. Fuck! Fuck! Okay, it didn't work out!
After that whole mess, he has secured 2 more hooks, and both this Claudette and the David are now dead on hook. He decides to chase this Nia, which runs around the hook, and then something amazing happens. Just as he's about to launch at her, the Claudette that just got unhooked runs right into him and takes the hit. He gets a decisive strike, is visibly bothered by this turn of events, and now is off to chase the Claudette. The Claudette does not know that this pallet is missing, and runs the loop more efficiently, and thus steps on the trap, putting her out of the game. Not too concerned with the Nia that was just around here, he sees a person on barbecue and decides to go for them. Personally, right here, I would have taken the window to the left and have a peek at the generator and see if I could see scratch marks leading somewhere. But he decides instead to go up here, pick up this trap and set it up on the same spot. Now this is a very strong trap, but you have to take into account that the person who stepped on it, the first survivor on the list, is still alive. So this trap can only work on 2 survivors now. Again, this is my personal opinion, but I prefer to switch traps around so that they're always unpredictable to all the survivors. And he's also making noise and spending time here, which means that that survivor that he saw on barbecue could be anywhere now. And indeed, the survivor is nowhere to be seen, so he assumes that he might have gone for a locker, and checks these 2. If you find yourself in a situation like this pretty often, consider running Nurse's Calling, or even better yet, Whispers, and you will never have this kind of downtime. He breaks a pallet here that is unsafe, maybe not the best idea, but we all want points after all, and he picks up this trap and replaces it again. I still think that this trap is not optimal, and in fact it will get disarmed again, so perhaps not the best idea. But now we're back, and you can see that he's actually got 3 generators really close to each other. Whether he did this accidentally or he actually managed to keep the last 3 generators this close together, I don't know, but very good for him. Even though he will not find a survivor for quite a bit of time, he's gonna make sure that these generators don't have much progress, and he's gonna keep patrolling them until he finds someone. Eventually he comes across the Nia again, And check it out, this Nia has found this trap that is identical to the one that she witnessed the Claudette step on earlier. If you put traps on the same spot, even on similar spots in tiles that look the same, survivors will wisen up and start looking in places that might otherwise go unnoticed. He decides to punish her commitment to disarm the trap and hits her with an attack, but now he should know that this Nia is most likely going to drop that pallet. I would use this time to pick up that trap and have it on my hands. Similar to Hunters or Clown, if you chase a survivor without any of your traps, there are a lot of potential mind games that you won't be able to pull off, so I personally would have picked up that trap right here. But he guesses that the Nia is not going to drop the pallet and just decides to keep running through it. And it seems to pay off, because now he's closed the gap really well with her. Unfortunately, he misjudges the distance and misses by just an inch. And when he hears this David right here, he decides to switch targets. He knows exactly what he's doing, and it pays off immediately. Well done with that trap. Now the David is out of the game. And for some reason the Nia decides to come back to this pallet. Again, he had a great chance to pick up that trap and use it during the chase. You can see again that that trap has been disarmed. Kind of proves my point. And he does decide to pick him up. He puts the trap down again at the pallet, which during a chase is a better idea, but he does put it a little bit too close to the center. Whether this trap is good or not, I am not sure. I think it's still good, but only by a little bit. Remember, if you put a trap too far into the pallet, the survivor will see it, they will drop the pallet, vault over it, and then they won't step on it. But anyway, thanks to his add-on, he can put this trap down really quickly and resume the chase. And you can see that the Nia is considering just what I told you, and she's about to drop the pallet and try to bolt over it, but she's not quick enough. Well done again. Our trapper will now use barbecue to find the last survivor successfully and head right in their direction. For some reason, the survivor saw fit to finish the last generator and go back to hiding, which is what they've been doing for most of the game. Props to the killer for having an incredible game sense and knowing where to look. I probably wouldn't have checked here. And since Noed has become active, the last survivor goes down in one hit, and that's the game. So after watching all of it, what can we learn from this game? On one hand, we have the killer making a pretty bad mistake by chasing this David for far too long. Luckily for him, his ruined totem spawned in an amazing spot that was really hard to find and that took survivors quite a long time to cleanse. But you might not be so lucky. We also have the fact that he voluntarily gave up his advantage in order to let the survivors heal and give them a second chance. Again, doing something like this can lose you the game, but the only reason this man got away with it is because other than these things, his gameplay was on point. He took the right amount of time to prepare, put survivors near his traps, not the other way around, and overall pushed them into the right spots at the right times in order to make these traps count. I hope that you found this gameplay instructive, and if you want to see more of it, please feel free to check out the 3 streamers featured in this video in the description. I'm sure they would appreciate a follow. And as for me, I'll be seeing you tomorrow in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.